are going to discuss about the emission standards or the emission regulations or the emission norms. Okay, what are these emission norms? Why the emission standards are required? Why emission regulations are required? If emission regulations are not there, what are the things going to happen? Okay, so first see what is emission standard. An emission standard are the legal requirements governing air pollutants released into the atmosphere. Emission standards set quantitative limits on the permissible amount of specific air pollutants that may be released from specific sources over specific time frame. Emission standards are generally designed to achieve air quality standards and to protect human life. The controlling the air quality index, which leads the standards of human life. Okay, in the previous semester we were discussing about the air quality index, and we discussed about certain air quality ranges, up to what range it is advisable, up to behind which range it is not advisable, we have discussed. And what these emission standards will play, in what way their role will play in reducing the vehicle emissions and its pollutant influence on the atmosphere as well as environment. Okay, if we look into the history of this emission standards, the first automobile emission standard were enacted in 1963 in United States, mainly as a response to Los Angeles smog problem. They were facing a lot of smog problems. It is a cold country. And after that, 1963, in the year of 1966, Japan enacted their first emission rules, followed between 1970 and 1972 by Canada. And in India, the first emission control regulations was enacted in 1988, that is for diesel emissions, and 1989 for petrol emissions. This is how the history goes, how the emission standards have come into picture. The first objective of emission standards is they will put forth some standards. This much of amount of pollutant should be emitted from the vehicles, so that the pollutants influence on the atmosphere and its adverse effect will not be influencing much on the environment as well as agriculture and human beings. If emission control regulations were not there, if emittents were emitted, then their influence on the environment will be very, very adverse, which leads to lots of diseases on human being, and it will become uncontrollable. So some standards are required, some regulations are required, so that the things may be under control and air pollution level will be under control. There are largely three main sets of standards. One is United States emission standards, another one is Japanese emission standards, and European emission standards. Okay, the countries like India, China, and other countries generally either they follow United States or Japanese or European emission standards. But as far as India is concerned, we are following the European emission standards. Okay, so whatever the standard we are following, it is called Bharat Stage Emission Standards. Bharat Stage Emission Standards, and these standards will follow whatever the European air pollution or air emission standards are concerned. As far as the Bharat Stage Emission Standards are concerned, these are the emission standards instituted by the government of India to regulate the output of air pollutants from internal combustion engine equipment, including motor vehicles. The standards and the implementation of these standards are set by Central Pollution Control Board of India, which is under the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change. The Indian emission standards are based on European regulations, which were first introduced in 2000. Officially in India, the first Indian emission standard has come into enforce in the year of 2000. Okay, that is the base emission standard. Progressively, there are stringent norms have been rolled out since then 2000. All whatever the iterations, newer and newer emission standards have enforced in India will have stricter regulations so that the emissions only this much of sulfur dioxide has to come out from the emission, this much of nitrous oxide has to come out from the emission, this much of hydrocarbons has to come out from the emission, and this much of particulate materials has to come out from the emission. So this is how the standards are based. As far as the European standards are concerned, in Europe, they have Euro Standard 1, Euro Emission Standard 2, Euro Emission Standard 3, Euro Emission Standard 4, Euro Emission Standard 5, and Euro Emission Standard 6. As far as in India is concerned, we have the base emission standard, that is in the year of 2000. Okay, and we have Bharat Stage Emission Standard 1, we have Bharat Stage Emission Standard 2, we have Bharat Stage Emission Standard 3, and we have Bharat Stage Emission Standard 4, and we are going to implement the Bharat Stage Emission Standard 6 by June of 2020. The Bharat Stage Emission Standard 5 is skipped due to achieving better control limits, which is being placed in case of Bharat Stage Emission Standard 6. Okay. Now, what are these Bharat emission standards? What do we understand by this? Bharat Stage Emission Standards. Okay, these are the standards set up by Indian government, which specify the amount of air pollutants from internal combustion engine, including those that of vehicles, whether it is a two-wheeler, four-wheeler, four-wheeler light vehicle, four-wheeler heavy vehicle, defense vehicles, whatever it may be. If these vehicles emit more pollutants than the prescribed limit, then they don't get clearance to be sold in those vehicles in the market. Okay, Bharat Stage Emission Standards have been instituted by Central Pollution Control Board, and this Central Pollution Control Board is working under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Now, if we look into how these will be in operation and what are the limitations, what are the plus points of each emission standards, I mean Bharat Stage Emission Standards. Okay, if we look into emission standards, here you can see the vehicles are getting more and more in number in the world, and in particular in India. Again, in India in particular, we are having daily the number of vehicles are being included, and they're emitting more and more pollutants, and it is very much necessary of the hour or need of the hour to have the stringent emission control regulations, which are possible by whatever the regulations we have right now. Okay, the pollutants from vehicles cause several health problems, leads to formation of smog and affects environment. Many countries are aiming at achieving safe concentration of these pollutants by regulating their level of emission. The level of emission has to be controlled so that its adverse effect can be minimized. And the emission standards regulate pollutants released by automobiles, industry, power plants, and generators. Okay, what are the pollutants? What are the pollutants to be controlled by the emission standards? The emission standard will control the pollutants like nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, particulate matter, soot, carbon monoxide, and volatile hydrocarbon. Okay, now if we look into, before we go into deeper about how the emission standards will support, and since 3 to 4 years we are seeing there is a automobile industry which is sick. Okay, and what are the reasons for sickness of automotive industry? Here 2 points will play major role. First one is the technical aspects. Okay, technical aspects only, it is nothing but emission standards for automobile. That is what we are going to discuss in brief. That is Bharat Stage Emission Standards. Okay, another one is why the automobile industry is sick. There is a globally economical sickness, deceleration is there, and the government policy also will affect as far as the automobile industry and its prosperity is concerned. And one more is the foreign direct investment policy of our country will also influence. Above all, here we are going to discuss about only the technical aspect. The technical aspect is playing a important and major role as far as the automobile industry is sick. Just one sentence I will tell you before we look into further. So since 2 years the vehicle manufacturing have minimized, because whatever the vehicles were so far whatever the vehicles were so far available in the market are manufactured, they cater the requirements of Bharat Stage Emission Standard 4. Okay, now 2020 June onwards, we are shifting from Bharat Stage 4 to Bharat Stage 6 emission standard limits. Okay, now what are the requirements and how the emission standards will have a role as far as the control of pollutants in the atmosphere are concerned. Emission standards are the legal requirements governing air pollutants released into the atmosphere. Emission standards set the main objective of emission standard will have a set quantitative limits on the permissible amount of specific air pollutants that may be released from specific sources. What are the specific sources? Now we are concentrating on the specific source for us, our studies, the automobile emitted emissions. Okay, and emission standards are generally designed to achieve air quality index. Emission standards are generally and mainly designed to achieve better air quality standards and to protect the human life from the diseases which are expected through air pollution. And as far as the Bharat Stage Emission Standards are concerned, just now I was telling, we are following the European emission standards. And progressively stringent norms have been rolled out since 2000. The first Bharat Stage Emission Standard has come into force in the year of 2000. Then onwards, number of stringent norms and standards have enforced in India. And all the new vehicles manufactured after the implementation of norms have to be compliant with the regulations, whatever the then regulations. So since October 2010, Bharat Stage 3 norms have been enforced across the country. And one more point we can see, in the year of 2010, in the month of April, partial enforcement of Bharat Stage 4 also come into force. Okay, how partial? How partial enforcing of Bharat Stage 4? Only 13 major cities of the country have been enforced with Bharat Stage 4 emission control standard, and the complete country is being enforced with Bharat Stage 4 from 2017 onwards. Okay, actually, so there is a gap between 2010 and 2017. 2010 Bharat Stage 3 and 2017 Bharat Stage 4. Actually, in fact, in the 2016 itself, we should have enforced Bharat Stage 5 norms. This we could not do it because we are going to enforce Bharat Stage 6 norms by 2020, which is a better standard than Bharat Stage 4. Okay, this is how. And see, one point we should remember: if we want to achieve something, we have to sacrifice something. If sacrificing something, we could have better achievement and better performance. In the case of this emission standards also, during the enforcing the Bharat Stage emission standards, which will bring down the pollution levels, but it invariably results in increased vehicle cost due to the improved technology and higher fuel prices. However, this increase in fuel manufacturing cost, or the cost of the vehicle, which is offset by saving the health cost for the public as well as to the country. Okay, so by enforcing the stringent emission standards, we are minimizing the pollution level in the atmosphere, so that its adverse effect will be minimum on human life as well as animal life as well as the agriculture. Okay, exposure to air pollution can lead to many adverse diseases, particularly in human being, respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, which is estimated to be a cause of more deaths, more early deaths. Okay, so even it influence the GDP of any country also, in particular in India. Okay, the Bharat Stage emission standard in India, it is controlled by the Central Pollution Control Board, and this Central Pollution Control Board, it falls under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which minimizes the emission standards. Then how the emission standards will work, and what are their major the forms or the regulations in each of the Bharat stage: BS1, BS2, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are all the indications of the iterations, the development of the emission standards. The Bharat stage emission standards are the emission standards instituted by Government of India. The standards and the timeline for implementation are set by Central Pollution Control Board. Okay, the standards based on European, whatever the emission standards in India we are following, they are all based on European regulations. The first Indian standard based on European regulation was introduced or enforced in India officially in the year of 2000. Then onwards, number of stringent norms have been rolled out since 2000. Okay. Then BS2, Bharat Stage Emission 2, Bharat Stage Emission 3 were introduced in 2005 and 2010 respectively. Okay, the Bharat Stage 4 emission standard was introduced in 2017 after a gap of 7 years between BS3 and BS4 emission standards. Okay, the BS6 emission standard is the sixth iteration of emission norm, and comparatively it is a substantial leap in terms of reducing pollution compared to the outgoing BS4 emission standard. Okay, BS5 has been skipped to move to better emission norms. Okay, so what is BS4? What are the special features of BS4? What BS4 will force? What are the pollutants controlled in this? And what are the manufacturing changes in the manufacturing industry as far as the automobiles are concerned, as far as this BS4 emission standards are concerned? Okay, as far as the BS4 is concerned, it will have the standards as far as the engine performance is concerned, and its pollutions and its significance. The Bharat Stage Emission Standards, which is governing organization for emissions from all types of vehicles in the country, starting from two-wheelers to the heavy-duty defense vehicles, introduced the first emission norm in the year 2000. Okay, BS2 and BS3, 2000, whatever it is enforced, we can say it is BS2, it is BS1, and BS2 and BS3 were introduced in 2005 and 2010, while BS4, okay, partially it is implemented, I said, in 2010, but country is enforcing this BS4 from 2017 onwards. The BS4 will have a strict emission standards or norms compared to BS3. Among the regulations set by the governing body, emission related changes included the tailpipe emissions. Electronic control unit is incorporated during the manufacturing of vehicles. Okay, ignition control limits also included in the manufacturing itself as far as the BS4 standards are concerned. Another very important feature of this BS4 in manufacturing is concerned, manufacturing of automobiles is concerned, the automatic headlamp is introduced. Before this BS4, the concept of headlamp was not there. Okay, now we have seen what is BS4. Okay, now slowly we are deviating, and we are shifting from BS4 to BS6. What is BS6? BS6. Okay, what is BS6? What is the BS6 emission standard? As it is already told, it is the sixth iteration of emission norm, and comparatively it is substantial leap in terms of reducing the pollution compared to BS4. Okay, this is also because BS5 actually it is supposed to be enforced in 2016. We are skipping it and we are directly shifting from BS4 to BS6. In fact, BS6 is expected to be enforced in the year of 2000. See, you can see here the chart of how the emission standards are enforced year-wise in India. Okay, and I was telling, generally whatever the emission standards in India, we are keeping the standard and we are enforcing to the vehicle. They are all based on Euro emission standard regulations. Okay, see, you can see first India emission standard in India, it is enforced in 2000. Okay, it is similar to the Euro 1, which is brought into enforce in European countries. Okay, Bharat Stage 2, that is Euro 2. Bharat Stage 2 in India, it is enforced in 2005. Bharat Stage Emission 3, Bharat Stage 3 Emission Standard. It is enforced in India in the year of 2010. Bharat Stage 4 Emission Standard. It is enforced in India 2017. Now Bharat Stage 5 Emission Standard, you can see this, it is not enforced. This we are skipping. Directly we are shifting from Bharat Stage 4 Emission Standard to Bharat Stage 6 Emission Standard. Okay, this is how the year wise, how the emission standards in India are enforced. Right now, still today, we are following Bharat Stage 4 emission standards. But one thing I will tell you, in due sessions we are going to discuss, already the vehicles which caters the emission standard 4 and their manufacturing, it is stopped. The manufacturing of vehicles started which cater the norms of Bharat Stage 6. Already the manufacturing has started, and already some of the vehicles which meets the requirement of Bharat Stage 6 norms are operating on the road. Okay. Now, what are the special features of this BS6? You can see in this BS6 legislation, we have world harmonized test cycle. Okay, all kinds of pollutants are tested, and we kept these are the limits which are to be controlled, and these are the limits of the pollutants which are to be expected to reach into the atmosphere, particularly emission limits of nitrogen oxide, okay, and particulate materials and carbon monoxide, volatile hydrocarbons, okay, and it also how the human life will become uh, uh, more comfortable by having the BS6 norms, okay, and as far as the requirements are concerned, here whatever the automobiles are manufacturing to cater and to meet the norms of BS6, and they have to follow the same. Not only the manufacturing, even the type of fuel, even the type of fuel which is to be used for the vehicles which are meeting the norms of BS6, and even the type of fuel, it is also changed. And even around 600 to 700 stations are using the fuels which meet the requirements of Bharat Stage 6. Okay, and here another important special feature of this BS6 is uh, the diagnostic on stage. We will come to know what are the portions are not working in the engine, and what are the pollutants are polluting more than the set limits of the BS6. Okay, and there is a continuous monitoring of NOx is made available in this thing. And as far as this now we have seen what are the pollutants are controlled, and now in what way the manufacturing in the vehicles are brought into changes to meet the requirement of BS4 and BS6. And this now here BS4 is concerned, we can see already we discussed in emission control system, exhaust gas recirculation, it is made available. Selective catalytic reduction, this is also made available. We have seen the emission control this thing. And NOx sensor, okay, it senses how much of NOx is found at the exhaust of the engines, okay. Diesel particular filter and common rail fuel injection system, okay. Now we should see, now we are shifting from BS4 to BS6. We should see what are the difference of BS4 and BS6. See, one point let us remember. BS4 and BS6 are emission norms. Both are the emission norms that set the maximum permissible levels for pollutants emitted from a car or a two-wheeler or any heavy-duty engines. Compared to BS4, BS6 emission standards are stricter, while manufacturers use this change to update their vehicles with new features and new safety standards. The biggest or the significant change comes in the form of stricter permissible emission norms. Stricter permissible emission norms. Okay, and the major difference between BS4 and outgoing BS6 and outgoing BS4 is the type of fuel used. Okay, as far as the fuel used in BS6 is concerned, the fuel contains 5 times fewer sulfur traces, that is 10 parts per million, compared to the sulfur traces in BS4, that is 50 parts per million. Okay, and on the similar lines, if we compare the NOx, that is nitrogen oxide level or traces in BS6 is concerned, it is this will be brought down by staggering 70% for diesel engine and 25% for petrol engine compared to the BS4. And we will see the table also how the differences will be, the BS6 fuel and BS4 fuel. The BS6 brings along a plenty of changes. Most significant being is, I was telling, the while the engine is operation, we could have a view, and there is a possibility that arrangement provision is made on board diagnostic, so the driver could able to minimize the whatever the faults are noticed in the BS6 vehicles. That flexibility is given by the manufacturer, which meets the requirement of BS6 norms. Okay, and real driving emissions will be introduced for the first time, that will measure the vehicle emission in real world conditions against the simulated conditions. Introduction of diesel particulate filter and selective catalytic reduction for diesel engines are the first time which is introduced as far as this BS6 is concerned. I was telling, I will show you the table as far as the type of fuel are concerned in petrol engines and diesel engines. If we look into petrol engine first, okay, the comparison made the pollutant gases and BS6 and BS4. Okay, BS6 and BS4. As far as the nitrogen oxide is concerned, in BS6 it is 60 mg has to be set the limit, whereas in case of BS4 it was 80 mg. Okay, the particulate matter in petrol passenger vehicle in BS6 it is 4.5, which was not a limit in case of BS4 vehicles. Okay, so that means it is an indication, that the fuel, whether it is a petrol or diesel, the fuel what is used in BS4, it is much more pure quality of the fuels we are going to use in BS6 emission standards. On the similar way, diesel passenger vehicles, the table comparison is given. As far as the diesel passenger vehicle is concerned, you can see the table. Nitrogen oxide in BS6 vehicles it is 80 mg, whereas it was in BS4 250 mg. So enormous quality of diesel has to be changed to meet the requirement of BS6 emission standard norms. And if you look into the particulate matter, PM. Particulate matter generally it is also called as soot, SOOT, soot. So in BS6 it is 4.5 mg per kilometer. It is in case you can see in case of BS4 it is 25 mg. Okay, the volatile hydrocarbon and NOx compound in case of BS6 it is 170 mg per kilogram, and you can see enormous difference. In case of BS4 it is 300 mg. Okay, that means whether it is a petrol or diesel, the quality of fuel which is used in BS6 to meet the norms of BS6, more quality fuel, more clear fuel, more lesser traces of dangerous pollutants which are expected at the exhaust can be minimized by using the quality fuel in BS6. This table shows. Okay, and the presently these are the vehicles which are available in market. BS6 already the manufacturing has started. The manufacturing of BS6 vehicles have started to meet the requirement of BS6 emission standard norms. Okay, these are the list of the vehicles which the manufacturing already started, which will meet the BS6 emission standard norms, which will meet the BS6 emission standard norms. Okay, and even these are the vehicles, two-wheelers are concerned, which the manufacturing started, and the BS6 scooters are already available. These are the manufacturing, as well as these are operating on road also. These were two-wheelers which are meeting the requirement of BS6 emission standard norms. Now we look into the features of BS6 emission standard. Bharat Stage 6 emission standard is compliant petrol vehicles are required to be 25% cleaner by reducing NOx, that is nitrogen oxide numbers, from 80 mg per kilogram to 60 mg per kilogram, which already we have seen in the previous table. For diesel cars, the BS6 norms aim at reducing three pollutants which include volatile hydrocarbon plus NOx, particulate matter also called soot. I used to regularly tell you, in some books they are used in place of particulate matter, soot also the term they used, and NOx. These are the three pollutants which are reduced in BS6 by 43, 68 and 82% respectively compared with BS4 norms. Okay, then BS6, the compliant engines make use of modern technology to attain these targets. Some of these include NOx traps, selective catalytic reduction units, and whatever I am naming, these are all incorporated while manufacturing the vehicle itself to meet the norms of BS6, the diesel particulate filters. Okay, and the manufacturers are presently using the process of phasing their BS6 cars by January or February 2020. Okay, and hereafter the whatever the vehicles which are manufactured, they are meeting the norms of BS6 regulations.